Ezekiel chapter 40. The temple area restored. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, on that very day the hand of the Lord was on me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel and set me a very high mountain, on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, "Son of man, look carefully and listen closely and pay attention to everything I am going to show you, for that is why you have been brought here. Tell the people of Israel everything you see." The east gate of the outer court, I saw a wall completely surrounding the temple area. The length measuring rod in the man's hand was 6 cubits long. Its width was cubit and half breadth, hand breadth. He measured the wall. It was one measuring rod stick and 1 rod high. Then he went to the east gate. He climbed its steps and measured the threshold of the gate. It was 1 rod depth. The alcoves for the guards were 1 rod long and 1 rod wide, and projecting walls between the alcoves were 5 cubits thick. And the threshold of the gate next to the portico facing to the temple was 1 rod thick. Then he measured the portico of the gateway. It was 8 cubits deep, and its jump were 2 cubits thick. The portico of the gateway faced the temple. Inside the east gate were 3 alcoves. On its side, the 3 had the same measurements, and the faces of the projecting walls on its side had the same measurements. Then he measured the width of the entrance of the gateway. It was 10 cubits, and its length was 13 cubits. In front of its alcove was a wall 1 cubit high, and the alcove were 6 cubits square. Then he measured the gateway from the top of the rear wall of one alcove to the top of the opposite one. The distance was 25 cubits, from one parapet opening to the opposite one. He measured along the faces of the projecting walls all around the inside of the gateway. 6 cubits, the measurement was up to the portico, facing the courtyard. The distance from the entrance of the gateway to the far end of its portico was 50 cubits. The alcoves and the projecting walls inside the gateway were surmounted by narrow parapet opening all around, and was the portico, an opening all around faced inward. The faces of the projecting walls were decorated with palm trees. The outer court. Then he brought me into the outer court. There I saw some rooms and pavement that had been constructed all around the court. There were 30 rooms along the pavement. It abutted the sides of the gateway and was as wide as they were long. This was the lower pavement. Then he measured the distance from the inside of the lower gateway to the outside of the inner court. It was 100 cubits on the east side as well as on the north gate. Then he measured the length and width of the north gate leading into the outer court. Its alcoves, 3 on its side, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurement as those of the first gateway. It was 50 cubits long and 55 cubits wide. Its opening, its portico, and its palm tree decorations had the same measurements, and those of the gate facing east, 7 steps lead up to it. With its portico opposite them, there was a gate to the inner court facing to the north gate, just as there was on the east. He measured from one gate to the opposite one. It was 100 cubits. The south gate. Then he led me to the south gate, south side, and I saw the south gate. He measured its jumps and its portico, and he had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had narrow opening all around, like the openings of the others. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. 7 steps led up to it. With its portico opposite them, it had palm tree decorations on the faces of the projecting walls on its side. The inner court also had a gate facing south, and he measured from this gate to the outer gate on the south side. It was 100 cubits. The gates of the inner court. Then he brought me into the inner court through the south gate, and he measured the south gate. It had the same measurement as the others. Its alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had opening all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. The porticos and the gateways around the inner court were 25 cubits wide and 5 cubits deep. As portico faced the inner court, palm trees decorated its jumps and 8 steps laid up to it. Then he brought me to the inner court on the east side, and the measurement, the gateway, it had the same measurements as the others. Its alcoves, its projecting walls, and its portico had the same measurements as the others. The gateway and its portico had openings all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer court, palm trees decorated the jumps on the other side, and its steps led up to it. Then he brought me to the north gate and measured it. It had the same measurements as the others, as did its alcoves. Its projecting walls and its portico, and it had opening all around. It was 50 cubits long and 25 cubits wide. Its portico faced the outer court, palm trees decorated the jumps and other side, and 8 steps led up to it. The rooms for preparing sacrifices. A room with doorway was by the portico in its of the inner gateways, where the burnt offerings were washed. In the portico of the gateway were 2 tables of its side, on which the burnt offerings, sin offerings, and guilt offerings were slaughtered. By the outside wall of the portico of the gateway, near the steps of the entrance of the north gateway were 2 tables. And on the other side and on the steps were 2 tables. So there were 4 tables on one side of the gateway and 4 on the other. 8 tables in all, and with the sacrifices we were slaughtered. There were also 4 tables of dressed stone for the burnt offerings. It's cubit and half long, a cubit and half wide, and a cubit high. On them were placed the utensils for slaughtering the burnt offerings and the other sacrifices. A double-pronged hooks, it's a handbreadth long, were attached to the wall all around. The tables were for the flesh of the offerings. The rooms for the priest, outside the inner gate, within the inner court, were 2 rooms, one at the side of the north gate and facing south, and the other at the side of the south gate and facing north. He said to me, "The room facing south is for the priests who guard the temple, and the room facing north is for the priests who guard the altar. These are the sons of Zadok, who are the only Levites whom many drew near to the Lord to minister before him." Then he measured the court. It was square 100 cubits long and 100 cubits wide. And the altar was in the front of the temple, the new temple. He brought me to the portico of the temple and measured the jumps of the portico. They were 5 cubits wide, either side. The width of the entrance was 14 cubits, and its projecting walls were 3 cubits wide on either side. The portico was 20 cubits wide and 12 cubits from front to back. It was raised to the flight of stairs, and there were pillars on its side of the jumps.